Starting off this countdown, we have the toy monkey. You may recognize this little demon monkey from the Conjuring universe. It made a little cameo in the movie Annabelle Comes Home. Anyways, apparently this monkey is possessed by a demon that enjoys stalking its victims before murdering them. That is absolutely horrifying. Why isn't this more well known? Now, there is good news to this. Apparently, it's no longer haunted. It was blessed by them and now stored safely in their museum. But before it was blessed, they told no one about this demon monkey. Coming in at number 9, we have the other dolls. And if you guys are liking this video so far, smash that like button and subscribe to our channel. So the Warrens have a number of creepy ass dolls that are possessed by demons, not just Annabelle. Let's take a look at some of these terrifying dolls. First up, we got this lovely doll with no mouth. Not gonna lie, it looks like a kid's paper mache craft. But that hair looks a little too real. Let's hope it's not. Then we have this doll. I didn't think we could get any worse, but whew, I was wrong. Okay, her eyes are horrifying. They literally just stole my soul. And last but not least, we got this gem. Because who doesn't love clowns, am I right? All of these dolls are apparently haunted by different demons. But that's all we know about them. The rest is a mystery. Moving on to number 8, we have the succubus demon. Succubus is a demon that is said to take the form of an attractive female in order to trick and seduce men. It's common for men to be visited by this demon in their dreams. Well, while investigating the Smurl family haunting, Ed came in contact with a succubus demon. Both Ed and Lorraine tried to remove this demon from the Smurl family's home, but actually failed to do so. That's when they had to call in Pope Benedict XVI for help. And they performed a ritual exorcism of the house. Maybe that's why we didn't know about this, because the Warrens failed at removing the demon and needed help. That must have been pretty embarrassing. In our 7th spot, we have the haunted house. The Borley Rectory is said to be one of the most haunted places in England. It was built in 1862 but sadly was damaged by a fire in 1939, and by 1944 the whole thing was demolished. Now here's the thing. Before it was demolished, it was said to be extremely haunted. People would hear footsteps and see ghostly apparitions of a nun and a phantom coach. In fact, when Ed and Lorraine Warren visited the church, this is when she encountered the real-life demon that inspired Valak. While there, she also saw a headless demon monk walking around that left cryptic messages on the walls. And also, they saw ghostly nuns walking around at night. That's when the Warrens hired a bunch of photographers to help capture evidence of these demons. They ended up encountering the ghost of a nun or demon nun. She was a real-life woman that got buried alive in the brick walls after having an affair with a monk. So there were multiple ghosts and demons at this church that the Warrens encountered, which were not publicized by them. Fun fact though, the Warrens kept a brick from this demolished church in their museum, cause why not, you know, memories, a little souvenir. In our 6th spot today, we have the Pearls of Death demon. This simple pearl necklace is said to be one of the most dangerous items in the Warrens museum. And honestly, it's the most beautiful. Doesn't it make you just want to pick it up and put it on? Well, don't, ever. This necklace is incredibly cursed and is said to strangle anyone who wears it. Basically, it all started when a woman was given this necklace. She put it on and claims that it felt like someone was strangling her to death. People around her had to actually yank the necklace off of her to save her. It was a near-death experience. It's believed that this necklace was used in incantations or rituals, or even was used as a holy relic to Satan worshippers. So now it's possessed by some sort of demon that wants to kill anyone who wears it. The Warrens again chose not to go that public with this necklace, because it might tempt people to visit the museum and put it on for themselves. And obviously, they don't want people dying at their hands. We are now at our 5th and halfway mark with the Union Cemetery Ghost. Now this one is a bit different than the other ghosts and demons on today's list, and that's because the Warrens kept this ghost a secret because it was fake. There wasn't actually a ghost. Let me explain. So according to a legend, there's a lady in white that haunts Union Cemetery in Easton, Connecticut. She was apparently the victim of betrayal by her lover, and she died either by taking her own life when she was heartbroken, or she was actually killed by her lover. Well, Ed was determined to capture her on tape, and enlisted his secret, not so secret lover, Penny, for help. So in the summer of 1990, Ed apparently camped out in the cemetery for a week trying to make contact with this ghost, and it was a fail. The two then faked a video of the lady in white, which was just Penny wearing white. Anyways, he went on to make great claims that he made contact with this ghost, but hardly any evidence was provided, just a few shadow ghosts on video, which was Penny. People were questioning the authenticity of this video, and he kinda was like, hey, let's just, forget about this, and then they just never talked about it again. Coming in at number 4, we have the Donovan family. In the 70s, the Donovan family was haunted by a very malevolent demon. It started off how it normally does. The family would hear loud noises coming from inside their walls. Eventually, things would happen like blood would pour out from their taps, and they would hear animalistic growls coming from within their house. The Warrens were sent in to investigate, and turns out that the daughter, Patty Donovan, used an Ouija board and was communicating with a spirit that claimed it was a young boy. Clearly, it was a demon in disguise as a young boy. After learning that, the Warrens called for a priest and they exorcised the house from evil. But how come this case wasn't as well known as the others? Why were they trying to keep it a secret? Seems suspicious. What were they hiding? In our third spot, we have the Antonellis. This is another innocent family that was terrorized by evil. It all started back in February of 1966, when the Antonelli family started experiencing some paranormal visitors. Miss Antonelli was the first to see it. She was about to doze off when she got a feeling that someone was in the room with her. She opened her eyes and saw a massive gray mist with 4 distinct appendages. She turned on the light and the figure disappeared. For years, this figure tormented her and no one believed her. That was until it started tormenting her husband, and he was all like, WTF is going on? The house really is haunted. Sorry sweetie, but I believe you now. I don't know if he actually said that, but it probably was something along those lines. Anyways, the Warrens were eventually called in and they conducted a seance. That's when they discovered a number of dark things happened at that house. Some of it was so disturbing that it's believed they wanted to try and keep this case a secret because of the home's gruesome past. Apparently, a young girl became pregnant by a neighbor. Her baby was then killed and buried in the cellar. That's just some of the dark things that happened there that the Warrens were willing to share. Moving on at number 2, we have the exorcism gone wrong. In the early 2000s, Ed and Lorraine Warren traveled to Japan to check out these so-called haunted tunnels, where a number of people mysteriously died in. But they got more than they bargained for, because while in Japan, they were called in to do an exorcism on a young girl named Teresa. There was a demon inside of her fighting to take control of her body. In fact, Teresa didn't speak a word of English, but during the exorcism, she spoke fluently. The leaked footage of the exorcism shows Teresa trying to fight back against the demon. But a number of people don't think it went too well. Even if you Google the case, no information comes up. So many fans believe that poor Teresa lost her life to this demon, which is why the Warrens kept this a big secret. And in our number 1 spot today, we have the Shadow Doll. I'm gonna start by saying that Annabelle looks like nothing compared to this doll. Seriously, its appearance alone is horrifying. Way creepier than that Raggedy Ann Annabelle doll. Anyways, according to the Warrens, this doll was used in a number of satanic rituals. In fact, the doll itself is composed of human and animal bones and black magic. Then, one of the rituals went wrong, or went right, because the doll became possessed by a demon, and it's super powerful. Rumor has it that if you take a picture of the doll, then it will latch onto you and visit you in your dreams. The dreams will be so bad that you'll either have a heart attack and die, or never want to sleep ever again. In fact, according to the Warrens, this demon doll has been responsible for a number of deaths. So the doll was first for sale in an antique shop, and a couple decided to buy it. I'ma stop myself right there. I don't know what possessed this couple to buy the doll. Probably the demon possessed them and convinced them it was a good idea, because who the hell would look at this thing and be like, huh, that's a great little fun-loving doll, isn't it cute? No! Anyways, the couple began to experience intense and horrifying nightmares. They later found out that they were having identical nightmares, and one night the husband woke up with huge gash marks on his back. They linked this all back to the doll and got rid of it. Now, since this demon is so powerful, the Warrens obviously didn't want to tell people about it, because then the media would go on a frenzy and take photos of it, and then the demon doll would curse all them. so they hid it away in their museum for as long as they could.
Starting off in our number 10 spot, we have the Antonellis. The story of this haunting starts off with Mrs. Antonelli, who, in February of 1966, claimed that while everyone else in the house was sleeping, she saw some sort of apparition. She explains that it was a mass of grey mist that had 4 distinct appendages, and she said it was bright and looked as if it were in sort of a bubble. No one, including her own husband, believed the things she had seen until a year later. It was at this point that one day, while Mr. Antonelli was home alone, he suddenly, out of nowhere, heard a quote ungodly scream, and when he looked in the direction that it came from, he saw the stairs in his house, but suddenly they appeared as if they went on forever. He sat down, he had a few coffees and cigarettes, like I think anyone would after seeing something like that, and after he thought it was over and went back to the housework he was doing, but he certainly was not right. Basically, it said that he put a hammer down about 7 to 10 feet away from the top of the stairs, and then all of a sudden the hammer came flying down them. He went to grab it, put it down again, and this time it suddenly flew right over his shoulder. It is said that when his family came home, he was still ghostly white and this time had 2 cigarettes in his mouth. From here, it is said that many other family members would go on to also experience very strange and unexplainable occurrences. It is said that for the Warrens, even in their long and full careers, this was one of the most interesting cases that they ever investigated. In our number 9 spot today, we have The Devil Made Me Do It. Before I dive into this one, guys, please don't forget to like this video, hit that thumbs up button if you're enjoying it so far. This is the Ed and Lorraine Warren story that is behind the 2021 Conjuring movie. In 1981, Arn Johnson was accused of taking the life of his landlord, Alan Bono. Ed and Lorraine had been called to the house prior to this taking place because the family believed that the younger brother of Arn's fiancée had been possessed by a demon, but when their paranormal investigations began, Ed and Lorraine claimed that Arn was also possessed by some sort of demon. The trial of Alan's killing ended up marking a point in time, as it was the first time demonic possession was used as a not guilty plea. In this case, it was unsuccessful, but it went on to be one of the most historic cases of Ed and Lorraine's. In our number 8 spot today, we have The Conjuring. Of course, we have to talk about this case because it is the one that really started a lot of our more modern interest in Ed and Lorraine cases. The house, often referred to now as the Conjuring House, was built in 1736, and it wasn't anything special and didn't really gain its fame until the family of Roger and Carolyn Perron moved in 1971. They claimed to experience terrible things like the smell of rotting flesh, witnessing something levitate in their beds as they slept, and one of the family members even claimed to have been possessed by a spirit. The family, of course, called Ed and Lorraine to come and investigate and hopefully help them out. Once there, the pair claimed that there was in fact a spirit haunting the home, and it was that of Bathsheba Sherman, who is said to have been a witch who previously lived in the house and who was buried in the cemetery nearby. The investigators had to make several trips to the house over the span of a few years, but as of now, it is said that the house belongs to new owners who continue to open their doors to paranormal investigators. In our number 7 spot today, we have Leslie. Leslie was a 19-year-old student who was attending college in Hartford when she encountered the Warrens. Leslie came from quite a well-off New York family, but in the end, she came to the Warrens for help because she was experiencing these unexplainable bouts of depression and anger, and she wanted to see them resolved. She actually, in the beginning, only met with Ed, and when she did, she explained to him that she had previously called upon demons and even the devil himself in order to help her win the love of a boy back home. Apparently, she had won the boy, and now Satan was on the way to claim her soul, which is why she needed the help of the Warrens before it became too late. In our number 6 spot today, we have Amityville. One of the cases that is perhaps the most famous of Ed and Lorraine's is that of the Amityville haunting. In the 1970s, couple George and Kathy Lutz contacted the paranormal pair because they claimed that their house was haunted by some sort of violent demonic presence. They said that this presence was so intense it forced them to have to leave their home. Considering the dark history this home had just before the couple had moved in, that includes the lives of the family who lived in the house before being taken, it wasn't necessarily a stretch to believe that the house was haunted by some sort of evil spirit. In the end, the Warrens investigated the home and backed up these claims that the Lutzes had, which is part of the reason why this case ended up launching its own multi-million-dollar franchise afterwards. In our number 5 spot today, we have The Vampire. This story is said to be that of a sort of possession, which I honestly wasn't expecting. It is said that the subject in this case, who isn't named, began to have an interest in the occult because of a sort of curiosity with morbidity and death. This then led to her starting to practice satanic rituals, which, listen, we can all express ourselves how we choose, but just be careful, you know, because for this woman, these rituals led to a bloodlust. She soon found herself waiting outside of cemeteries and dark places trying to find a young man to prey upon. She would bite them like what you would expect a vampire to do, but it is said that these bites were only to satisfy her craving and hunger and that the bites were never serious. I'm just saying, serious injury or not, it's pretty messed up. It is said that during her interview with Ed Warren, the woman confessed to having bitten 16 different people in this way. In our number 4 spot today, we have West Point. This story starts off when Ed and Lorraine were called to a military academy in West Point, New York. When the couple arrived, it is said that Lorraine could sense what was going on. She felt the presence of an Irish cook named Molly. She explained that Molly was a bit clumsy and messy, but this wasn't the only presence, however. The officers at the academy would complain about a ghost moving objects around their living quarters. It was later identified as a ghost named Greer, which, after some research, turned out to be quite eerie. This is because it is believed that the ghost might have been that of Lawrence Greer. This man was a Buffalo soldier until it is said that he turned into a killer. Here's the really creepy part though. I mean, as if being a killer isn't creepy enough. It is said that after Greer's trial, there is no record of what happened to him. In our number 3 spot today, we have Union Cemetery. The Union Cemetery in Easton, Connecticut is known as one of the most haunted cemeteries in the United States, which definitely says a lot. The most famous of all of its hauntings is a presence that is referred to as the White Lady. There are many people who have experienced this ghostly presence, and many people have seen her walking in front of their cars as they drive near the cemetery. That is all exactly why, in 1990, the Warrens decided to experience it for themselves when they set up cameras in this haunted location. It is said that just after 2:40 a.m. they heard the sound of weeping, and a paranormal figure began to move several feet in their direction. It is said that as they witnessed this, Ed tried to slowly approach her, but she suddenly vanished just as quickly as she had appeared. In our number 2 spot today, we have the origin story. We talk a lot about the most famous cases of the Warrens, like the ones that inspired the Conjuring movies, or Haunting in Connecticut, or The Nun, but what we don't really talk about is how the Warrens got into the occult themselves. I mean, most people, especially in their day, don't wake up and suddenly go, I think I'm gonna dedicate my life to the paranormal, so something must have happened to pique their interest, right? Well, apparently for Ed Warren, it started at quite a young age. It is said that Ed realized at only age 5 that his house was haunted. Apparently he witnessed a glowing orb and a terrifying woman's face coming out of his closet. I mean, that would be horrible to see as a grown adult. I can't imagine at that age, but it fully makes sense as to why he later became so interested in the things he did. Before Ed and Lorraine became the names they are today, it is said that in order to help the pair get a foot in the door, literally into haunted homes, Ed used his passion for painting. He used this by painting homeowners pictures of their houses. Clearly something he did must have worked. In our number 1 spot today, we have The Haunting in Connecticut. If you've ever seen or read The Haunting in Connecticut, this is a home and a story that might be a little familiar. In 1986, the Snedeker family moved into a new rental home that at one time had previously been a funeral home. In the basement, the family found some less than welcoming items that were left from the home's previous life. Shortly after moving in, however, their discoveries would become more gruesome as they began to have reports of evil coming from the house. These included attacks on the family members, seeing apparitions, and they even explained violent personality changes from one of the members. When Ed and Lorraine investigated the house, they were able to confirm that it was in fact haunted. It is said that one of the most frightening things that took place in the house, aside from the rumors of possession, was one day when a family member was mopping the floor and all of a sudden the water suddenly turned blood red.
Number 10. The White Lady of Union Cemetery. Located in Easton, Connecticut, the Union Cemetery is widely regarded as one of the most haunted cemeteries in the US. Built in the 1700s, it's the host to hundreds of grave sites, and allegedly some of the spirits of those buried there still linger around their plots. Chief among these is the White Lady, a woman with long dark hair wearing a white nightgown and a bonnet to match. Ed Warren visited here to investigate the various claims of paranormal activity, including the ghostly red eyes of a man burned to death across the street that peer at you from the bushes. He claimed he was able to catch the lady in white on film and to have attempted to dispel her spirit, but there have been many sightings since, including one where the ghostly figure dented a car that drove through her as she appeared. Amateur and professional investigators frequent the cemetery to find out anything they can about the restless spirits here. Number 9. South End Werewolf. 9-year-old Bill Ramsey was playing in his back garden when he felt a sudden chill wash over him, and he suddenly started smelling something foul. He reported that suddenly an intense rage entered his body and he was flooded with strength. He pulled a fence post out of the ground with the fence still attached and began to swing it around like a club. Now, I've put up a fence or two in my day, and those posts are not anything close to light. So this 9-year-old has some major strength or something else fueling him. But it didn't stop there. He then began gnawing on the wire and growling. His parents were frightened and remained inside until he calmed down. And over the next 30 years, he only had a few incidents, nearly attacking his wife in his sleep, allegedly growing claws, and attacking and biting a friend while they were in a car. Over a year later, he went to the hospital after experiencing chest pains, where he suddenly bit a nurse, and patients report seeing him with a hunched back, growing claws from his hands, and having superhuman strength. He attacked multiple police officers and was tranquilized. Many more incidents like this occurred, and doctors ran every test they had but found no anomalies. So Bill went to visit the Warrens, who performed an exorcism with the help of a bishop, during which he began to transform one last time before the demon was cast out. The Warrens even filmed this, and to this day, the case still baffles doctors and mental health professionals, as there have been no incidents since, but he has been inactive for this long before, so who knows. Number 8, the Lindley Street haunting. This was indeed a haunting in Connecticut, but not that one. That comes later. Man, that state sure has a lot of famous ghost stories. In 1974, Gerard and Laura Gooden reported to the police that they had been under attack by some unseen forces that were lifting and throwing furniture, breaking windows, and even making their cat talk, or even sing, as one person recalls. The Warrens were called to investigate and found that the Goodens' adopted daughter Marcia may have had something to do with it, perhaps being possessed by a demon, as most of the unexplainable behavior started not soon after they brought her into their home for the first time. Banging from inside the walls and doors slamming were just the beginning. There were even multiple witnesses who verified all of these happenings, one of which tried to burn the house down to dispel the evils inside. Eventually, Marcia confessed to faking the strange activity herself and that it was all a hoax, which set the legal cases to rest. But no one could explain the crazy things that happened while Marcia was not in the house, or why things continued to move and float for a long time after everything was put to bed. And people still attempt to visit the house now to conduct paranormal investigations, though the current owners want nothing to do with that and do not wish to speak about their house's haunted history. Number 7, the case of Arne Johnson. One of the many cases that has now become a feature film, the story of murder and possession is still hotly contested by legal scholars and paranormal investigators alike. More well known as The Devil Made Me Do It, the case sees the first time in United States legal history that a claim of demonic possession and denial of personal responsibility was used as a defense for a crime. A family member of Johnson's had recently had an exorcism performed on him by the Warrens, and during that ceremony, Arne taunted the demon that exited the boy and told it to enter him. Arne began to exhibit strange behaviors, including disassociating, growling, and claiming that the demon had forced him to drive his car into a tree. After a party at their new apartment with many people who lived and worked in the building, Johnson stabbed the building's landlord 20 times in the chest, leaving many wounds, including one that went from his stomach all the way up to his heart, and he died shortly after. Johnson maintains that he had no memory of the event at all, and in court argued that he had seen the demon in him many times before in reflections and claimed demonic possession as a defense. This is probably the main reason that this case is still so often thought of and is still being investigated. It was also the first unlawful killing in the history of this town of Brookfield, also in Connecticut. Go figure. Number 6, West Point. In October of 1972, the US Army was having the Warrens give a general lecture to the students at the military academy, but a few days before, the executive officer phoned them up and asked if they could come down early to investigate a security problem they were experiencing. The problem the officer called them about, a haunting at the superintendent's house, wasn't the only investigation they ended up undertaking. While they resolved the issue at the officer's home, the moving books and missing items were due to some spirits which were dispelled, causing no problems from then on. They caught wind from a few students that there was another haunted area on campus, room 4714. In the North Barracks, 2 cadets were asleep when suddenly a ghostly figure in a uniform from the 1830s wielding a musket appeared right in front of them. His stare and sheer presence made the boys freeze in fear, and then he disappeared. He was seen multiple times after that, but the Warrens did their work, and an exorcism was performed, and no one sleeps in that room anymore, though many students attempt to contact and look for the spirit that once resided here. Number 5, the Smurl House. In the 1970s, Jack and Janet Smurl purchased a new townhouse in Pennsylvania and moved in in with their children. Soon after, as so often happens in these cases, strange things started happening. Items would go missing, voices would be heard when no one was near, knocking from inside walls, and even a chandelier falling and almost killing Janet. There were also reports of problems with electric devices, something paranormal experts attribute to demons and spirits affecting electromagnetic fields. The family called Ed and Lorraine after the church refused their request for help when claw marks appeared on the inside of their doors, and they arrived and collected video and audio recordings of the creepy events they saw take place and used the evidence to secure an exorcism, or 3 actually, none of which worked, the family says. They moved out in 1989 trying to escape the demons inside, and apparently they have, but paranormal experts still want to look into the house more to see what entities still reside there. Number 4. Satan's Harvest. A few of these stories have appeared in the movie universe that follow some of Ed and Lorraine's cases, and so they are well known, but sometimes the movie misses the mark. Maurice Theriault, also known as Frenchie, was a farmer in New England who grew up in a home which only got more and more violent and sadistic as he grew older, being forced to watch and participate in horrible events. He asked for help from so many people, including God and Satan, really trying to cover his bases, but no one came to help. As he grew, he found himself knowing things he should have no knowledge of, being stronger than he had any right to be, and he began to hear voices. His father sabotaged his chance at finishing school and joining the army to keep him on the farm. Later on, the family started to notice strange things happening too. Frenchie would lose periods of time. Small fires would randomly appear around the property, and they began to hear voices from within the walls. You would follow Frenchie into a room only to turn the corner and have him not be there, but back where you both just came from. When the Warrens visited, they immediately sensed evil forces and began the process of an exorcism, which Frenchie wanted, but his body resisted. Upside down crosses appeared scratched into his body. He started bleeding from the forehead, and he randomly began to attack and strangle his wife while being exorcised. And the craziest part of all of this is that it was all caught on tape, leaving people the ability to watch and research the case on their own. Maurice appears as a character in a number of the Conjuring films, notably The Nun, though his story in the movies is not close to what really happened. Number 3. The Snedeker House. Here we go, back to Connecticut again, this time for the actual haunting in Connecticut. Wow, how many times can I say Connecticut in this video? Connecticut, Connecticut. In 1986, the Snedeker family moved into a simple home in Southington. Over time, they found more and more evidence that their house had once been a funeral home. They found blood drains, a gurney, toe tags, lots of spooky stuff. And soon they were reporting violent attacks, apparitions, and personality changes in their oldest son. The Warrens attributed this to a former mortician who regularly practiced necromancy, and those troubled demons were coming back to haunt the place they were never allowed to rest in. The movie shows some pretty harrowing scenes, which, according to the family, are close to what happened, though reports have come out of the son admitting to some of the behavior, and much of the rest was sensationalized. The subsequent owners of the house have had no issues since the exorcism, but horror aficionados still make the pilgrimage to see one of the most well-known haunted places for themselves. Number 2. Borley Rectory. After hearing about a string of spooky events at the Borley Church, including bells ringing without warning, sights of a headless monk leaving messages on the walls, and a ghostly nun walking the halls at night, which is where the inspiration for The Nun came from, the Warrens hired a crack team of paranormal photographers to investigate the site with them, and boy did they ever find something. In many photos, including on infrared film, they captured the ghost of a nun walking through the aisles and praying. Allegedly, the nun was burned alive in the walls of the convent after she had an affair with a monk, and walks the halls trying to repent for her sins. There's a lot of interesting stuff here, with the church having burned down in the 40s, countless reports of these apparitions. It's no wonder why people flock here to find something spooky for themselves. And finally, number 1, the Perron house. The tragedy of the Perron family is what the first Conjuring film was based on, so I'm sure many of you already know the story, but I'll give you the basics. Carolyn, Roger, and their 5 daughters moved into a farmhouse in Rhode Island in 1971, and immediately things started to go wrong, like so many other cases. The sound of scraping metal and objects appearing in different rooms, and then they started to notice the presence of spirits. Many members of the previous owner's family died in mysterious circumstances. Many drowned, some took their own lives, and others had their lives taken from them too soon. And these were just some of the spirits that haunted them. There was also the spirit of a witch here, Bathsheba, who killed their neighbor and cursed the land before hanging herself from a tree outside. She was apparently the most vengeful and violent, and caused injury and mental trauma to many of the family members, and a seance was performed by the Warrens to attempt to rid the house of her presence. This house is still standing, and in the past few years many teams have gone out to the property and used technology to search the grounds for bodies buried there. There is a small cemetery not too far from the property where there is a headstone for Bathsheba, but they may find some other horrifying things on or under the property as they continue investigations and continue the Warrens' work.
Starting off this countdown, we have the Enfield haunting. This is the house and case that The Conjuring 2 was based off of. The case involved a young girl named Janet Hodgson, who was said to have been possessed by a spirit. The spirit would throw objects across the room, make noises in their house, and sometimes would even levitate Janet into mid-air. Ed and Lorraine Warren were assigned to this case and to expel the evil entity responsible for all of this. But turns out that Janet and her sister Peggy made up this whole thing. In 2015, when Janet was 45 years old, she said that her and her sister faked some of the phenomena. So according to researchers, most of the paranormal things happened when no one was actually looking at the two girls. Like, they would have their backs turned to them and then all of a sudden an object would be thrown through the air. Well, obviously the girls were doing that themselves. They also said they captured audio of a dresser falling over on its own. But upon closer inspection, footsteps could be heard leading up to the dresser before it fell over, meaning someone likely pushed it over. And the photos of Janet apparently levitating in midair looked like she just jumped off her bed. So the whole Janet being haunted by a ghost, yeah, that was made up, and the Warrens went along with it. In our 9th spot, we have the credibility. Okay, now I was diving deep into Reddit looking at what everyone thought about the Warrens when I came across a post from a user named Jack_Shid. Jack claims that he worked alongside the Warrens for a couple of cases. He proceeded to reveal that they have no credibility and it's pretty much all BS. He goes on saying that he thinks they just fell in love with fame during the whole Amityville haunting and they created their business from there. So it could just be that they make up all these hauntings just to then make a book to then make money. But before I go any further, make sure to give this video a big thumbs up because it really helps us out. Moving on, at number 8 we have the Amityville Horror. Probably one of the most controversial paranormal cases of all time. Because in the end, the whole thing was just one big sham. So here's a little rundown. On November 13th of 1974, Robert Butch DeFeo killed his parents and his 2 brothers and 2 sisters. The house was put up for sale and the Lutz family moved in. And apparently the demon that got Butch to do that horrific deed started to attack their family, and their doors and cupboards would swing open and close, green slime would ooze from their ceiling, and one time a demonic face with red glowing eyes was seen looking into the house. So on and so on. The Warrens went to investigate and confirmed that the house was haunted. But clearly that was a lie because guess what? Butch's lawyer, William Weber, admitted that he made up this whole story along with George Lutz. They created the story over many bottles of wine, they said. They admitted the house was never really haunted, they just made it all up. Which means so did the Warrens. In our 7th spot, we have the Werewolf Man. This was a pretty weird case if you ask me. But a man named William, or Bill Ramsey, claimed to have been possessed by a werewolf. Apparently he used to try and bite his family and also had superhuman strength. At one point he managed to rip a post right up from the concrete. So on and so on, you get it. He was claimed to be possessed by a werewolf. The Warrens were sent to exorcise this demon out of his body. And they talk all about this in their book, Werewolf, a true story of demonic possession. But a lot of people aren't buying this story. I mean, they haven't produced any photos or material evidence. And the story just seems so hard to believe. Like, a man possessed by a werewolf, and then he gets exorcised and he's just magically cured? No, a lot of people think that this case was all a sham as well. Moving on, at number 6 we have the illegal relationship. A woman named Judith Penny came forward saying that in the early 1960s, she had a relationship with Ed Warren. This was going on when she was not of age. Ed was apparently in his mid-30s when he met Penny. Penny was 15. The two began to have a relationship with Lorraine knowing. In 1963, she moved in with them. She stayed in a bedroom right across the couple's room in their home. Now, Penny ended up coming forward with this because of how their relationship was displayed in the movies. They looked like such a loving, perfect Catholic couple. But they weren't. They had their dark side, especially Ed with his relationship with a young girl. We're now at our 5th and halfway mark with the baby. Now Penny went on to expose a lot about the Warrens. In fact, in May of 1978, she got pregnant with Ed's child. But guess what? She was forced to abort the child. Apparently, if word got out, then this scandal could ruin their reputation. In fact, when Penny was living with the Warrens, they would lie and just say she was their niece or a poor girl that they took in out of the goodness of their own hearts. It's pretty sick if you ask me. Penny literally didn't have a choice but to get rid of the baby. In fact, they wanted Penny to tell everyone that someone broke into her apartment and took advantage of her, and that's how she got pregnant. She refused to do that, and they got so mad that she was terrified. Like, that's so heartbreaking. Moving on to number 4, we have the toxic relationship. Again, in the films, Ed and Lorraine Warren seem like a perfect demon fighting duo. You can tell that they love and care about each other dearly. Except, according to Penny, this wasn't the case in real life. She said that Ed was very physically and verbally towards Lorraine. In fact, she said that one time she witnessed Ed backhand Lorraine so hard that she lost consciousness. In fact, he would often slap her across the face to get her to stop talking. Penny literally said, and I quote, "Some nights I've thought they were going to kill each other." That is terrifying. In our 3rd spot, we have the Lady in White. One famous ghost is one called the Lady in White, who haunts Union Cemetery in Easton, Connecticut. According to the legend, she's the victim of betrayal by her lover, and she died either by taking her own life from being heartbroken or by being killed by her lover. Well, Ed was determined to capture her on tape and enlisted Penny's help. In fact, Penny helped keep Ed's reputation as a ghost hunter. So in the summer of 1990, Ed apparently camped out in the cemetery for a week trying to make contact with this ghost. The two faked a video of the Lady in White, which was just Penny. Anyways, he went on to make great claims that he made contact with her, but hardly any evidence was provided, just a few shadow ghosts on video, which we now know was Penny. Coming in at number 2, we have the Smurl haunting. Back in the 1980s, the Smurl family swore that their house was haunted. They would hear loud noises, smell foul odors, and hear pig grunts. Apparently, whatever was haunting their house also threw their dog against the wall and pushed one of their daughters down the stairs. Of course, Ed and Lorraine came to investigate, and they claimed it was haunted. They even said that they saw a message appear on a mirror that read, "Get out." But get this, members of the clergy were brought in to do a blessing and exorcism. And guess what? They reported nothing unusual happening there. But the Warrens were adamant that the house was haunted, and they turned the story into a book and then made money off of it. And in our number 1 spot, we have The Devil Made Me Do It. In 1981, a man named Arn Cheyenne Johnson was arrested after fatally stabbing his landlord to death. But his case was much different than others. He claimed that the devil made him do it. In fact, his case was the first court case where the defense was arguing demonic possession. And guess who was involved in all of this? Ed and Lorraine Warren. But turns out that Ed and Lorraine Warren might have concocted this whole story for him. So according to the story they put out, Johnson's brother-in-law, David Glatzel, was the first one to become possessed by a demon. He claimed a man with big black eyes and a thin face with animal features was controlling him. Johnson eventually went on to taunt this demon, telling it to stop bothering David and to take him instead. And I guess the demon did what he asked, because then Johnson was possessed by this demon, and that's what made him kill the landlord. But according to David's brother Carl, David was never possessed. He was just mentally ill and needed help from doctors. He then claims that his whole family was manipulated by the Warrens. They created this whole story about demons in an attempt to get rich and famous. According to Carl, the Warrens promised his family that they'd become millionaires if they would insist that both Carl and David were haunted by demons. In the end, he ended up suing the Warrens for trying to exploit his brother's mental illness, and for also attempting to get a guilty man to walk free.
Number 10. We're starting off strong with the Devil Made Me Do It case. If you're a fan of Ed and Lorraine, you know this one. The Devil Made Me Do It case is arguably one of the most famous cases that Ed and Lorraine ever worked on. But beyond the supernatural, this case was right in the public eye. Not only were there demons and the supernatural, but the scrutiny of the public eye made this a whole different monster for the Warrens. A bunch of people outside of the courthouse making claims and threats over the case isn't easy to deal with. When 19-year-old Arn Cheyenne Johnson took the life of his landlord and blamed it on the devil, Ed and Lorraine jumped to his defense. They were convinced a demon had entered him after he tried to save his brother from a vicious possession a year earlier. His younger brother was possessed by 43 demons, and Arn commanded that they leave him and enter him instead. The Warrens fell under immense scrutiny, but according to them, the court had defended accounts of God in the past. Now it was time to defend accounts of the devil. But one thing remains strange to me. Arn was never exorcised after the event. Does that mean they are still with him? Number 9. Highgate Cemetery. Where were they for the vampire hysteria at Highgate Cemetery? Like, where were you? When I learned about this case, I was flabbergasted, and it's weird to me that they weren't there. They've dealt with werewolves but missed out on vampires completely? The Highgate Cemetery in London, England has some of the oldest graves in the world, making it the perfect breeding ground for ghosts, ghouls, goblins, and vampires. Ooh, it's spooky season. The Highgate vampire case caused a media uproar in the 60s that culminated in two magicians facing off to see who could catch the vampire first. It all started when two girls reported seeing the dead rise from the graves while walking through Swain Lane one night. Soon, animal carcasses drained of blood started turning up. Newspapers had their cameras ready. A massive vampire hunt was organized on Friday, April 13th, in 1973, and bodies were even exhumed from their graves to see if they were toothy. Sadly, no one caught anything, but the case still sends a tingle down the spines of vampire enthusiasts around the world. Legends of the demon, though, continue, along with sightings of a crazed old woman and corpses appearing in places they shouldn't be. Number 8. The Bell Witch. I searched the internet far and wide to see if the Warrens had ever visited the Bell Farm, but alas, no. If I'm wrong and I missed something, post a link down in the comments because I'm not perfect and maybe I missed it. But as far as I can see, they never actually checked out one of the most famous hauntings in the world. 200 years later, the Bell Cave remains an attraction, and many still report hearing a shrill, scratchy voice when no one is around and see orbs surrounding the farm, or where it used to stand. Though the actual events happened well before the time of the Warrens, and the farm was torn down, the Bell Cave was still there. If there was any duo who could have proven the tale of the Bell Witch, it was them, but maybe, just maybe, they were afraid of what they might find. Number 7. Michael Taylor. The Michael Taylor case is one of the strangest I've ever come across while doing lists like this, and it certainly needed Ed and Lorraine. The horrifying events of Michael Taylor happened in the 1970s, specifically 1974. A man who was considered a good husband, father, and community man suddenly flipped. He began enduring bouts of severe depression and was visiting a 21-year-old pastor named Marie Robinson for counsel. His wife was obviously suspicious, but the sessions were helping. Mary allegedly performed many exorcisms on him to expel the demons. Taylor's wife was getting pretty antsy, and they ended up having a confrontation during which Taylor attacked his wife. It was after this moment Taylor resolved to undergo a full-blown exorcism on October 5th, 1974. During this, Michael had seizures, he spit and bit the ministers, and screamed in tongues. Unfortunately though, it did not expel all the demons, and Taylor returned home in a rage. He took the life of his wife in an incredibly gruesome way, and was later found screaming in the street, naked and covered in blood. I don't think the Warrens ever encountered anything as violent, but imagine if they did. Number 6. Richard Gallagher and Julia. Richard Gallagher is a man I find entirely fascinating because his transition from being a man of science to a full-on believer of the occult is, for lack of a better word, insane. Now obviously the Warrens had their domain, but imagine if these guys collaborated on this case? What? Though, I don't know if Gallagher needed the help. Just saying. The case I'm referring to is when Gallagher encountered a transformative possession. Gallagher became the go-to guy to diagnose people who claimed to be possessed. An Ivy League psychiatrist, he would help those who were mistaking mental illness for something mystical. Julia was the first time he encountered someone he couldn't explain. Julia was the queen of a satanic cult and had become possessed, which she desperately wanted to be rid of. Skeptical at first, but when Richard sat down to talk to her, she knew intimate details about his life. Objects would fly off the wall, and once during a phone call with the priest, they both heard one of the demonic voices she'd speak in around them, even though Julia was across the country. Number 5, the Thornton Heath Poltergeist. It was the 1970s. Thornton Heath, England. Where were the Warrens? Probably busy, or too scared to bother with such a terrifying case. It all started one hot August evening when the family living in the house was awoken by their radio suddenly blaring to life. This was just the beginning to a terrible haunting the family would endure for 4 years. Objects would fall or be thrown across the room by invisible hands, you know, all the usual poltergeisty things. One night, the son awoke to find a man standing at the end of his bed, like staring at him with like venom in his eyes. After a bunch of startling incidents, they tried to have the house blessed, but it failed. However, a medium did discover that the house was haunted by a couple named the Chattertons who considered them trespassers on their property. The family eventually had no other option but to move out, and the activity has since ceased. But imagine if the Warrens were on the case, probably would have been solved so much sooner. Or not, who knows. Number 4, the Danny Poltergeist case. In 1998, a woman named Jane Fishman reported strange happenings regarding an antique bed in the home of Al Cobb in Savannah, Georgia. It was a vintage 1800s bed that Cobb bought at auction for his son, a purchase he later regretted. 3 nights after it was purchased, Jason, the son, told his parents that someone was watching him on the bed. He felt cold breath on his neck and saw the impressions of elbows dipping into the pillow. He also noticed the photo of his deceased grandparents lying face down on the dresser, which became a reoccurring event. After he put it back up, it'd fall back out. But then, one morning, an assortment of strange objects, including animals made from shells, was found on his bed after he'd already gone down to breakfast. That got his parents and his twin brother's attention. They left paper and crayons out and asked the ghost what his name was. Then later they came back to see Danny 7 written on the paper. After several communications and a smashed terracotta planter, it was clear that Danny didn't want anyone in his bed. The family eventually got rid of the bed, but that didn't solve the problem. Turns out Jason's connection to the spirits went skin deep, and he continued to see things after the event. Number 3, here we go. The Winchester House. This place is on my bucket list to visit, so it's a wonder to me why the Warrens never checked it out. Again, I googled it, they didn't. Prove me wrong in the comments. I welcome correction, as always, thank you. But it's essentially a 24,000 square feet mansion with 10,000 windows, 2,000 doors, 160 rooms, 52 skylights, 47 stairways and fireplaces, 17 chimneys, 13 bathrooms, 6 kitchens, and cost Sarah $5 million to build, about $71 million today. There are stairs and doors that lead to nowhere, windows that don't open. It's a labyrinth of mystery. Sarah Winchester and her husband William Winchester amassed a huge fortune from their sale of the, you guessed it, Winchester rifle. After her daughter died of TB and William left Sarah a widow, she consulted a medium who told her that she would constantly be haunted by the spirits killed by the Winchester rifle. The house never stopped construction until she died in 1922. It is said the house was built to trap the spirits inside. Today, it's considered one of the most haunted places in the world and is well worth a visit for anyone seeking a scare. So where the heck were the Warrens to debunk this thing? It would have been awesome. Number 2, the Amityville Horror case. Obviously, I had to put this case on the list because this case remained the scariest event of Ed and Lorraine's career.
It had the monstrosities of the night which roamed that house, which infested it, which caused a young man to murder his whole family.
The events at Amityville, Long Island in 1975 shook the nation and the box office. The Lutz family moved into their dream suburban home with optimism and hope for their life. But little did they know, a year earlier, Ronald DeFia Jr. shot and killed all 6 members of his family, priming the property with evil. The Lutzes didn't know what to make of the swarms of flies, loud, aggressive banging noises, disturbing entities, and even levitations occurring in the home. So So they got the hell out of Dodge, leaving all their belongings in the process. When they finally called the Warrens in, George Lutz, the father, who was, by the way, an ex-Marine and karate expert, literally supposed to be fearless, wouldn't even meet them at the house. They met at a Pizza Hut. But as soon as the Warrens began working on the case, they understood why.
The Amityville case affected our personal lives more than any case we ever worked on.
To this day, Lorraine says that this is the case that haunts her the most and said that she hoped this was the closest to hell as she would ever get. So if that's not too scary, I don't know what is. And now we are getting to number 1, the Warrens. Demons, poltergeists, and ghosts. It was hard to find a case that the Warrens wouldn't face. They seemed fearless, their love strong enough to withstand all the forces of darkness, or at least that's how the movies told it. It turns out that the real case the Warrens were too afraid of was the horrifying truth of their marriage. Yup, we're going there. If you're a fan of the movie franchise, then you know that Lorraine had a lot of influence on the stories up until her death, but a weird detail in her contact alludes to some nefarious activity in their personal life. Neither Ed or Lorraine Warren could be depicted violating anyone or performing adult acts with a minor. The reason that was in there might have something to do with the case of Judith Penny. Penny stayed with the Warrens as a young woman and allegedly had an inappropriate relationship with Ed, and Lorraine knew about it. Judith made a legal declaration in November 2014 stating that Penny and Ed had begun an amorous relationship when he was her bus driver and she moved in with them in 1963. That same year, Penny was arrested when someone noticed the illegal relationship between her and Ed. Why she was arrested and not him remains in question to me, but Penny also stated that Ed was abusive towards Lorraine, saying, and I quote, "Sometimes Ed would actually have to slap her across the face to shut her up. Some nights I thought they were going to kill each other." Lorraine denied the allegations through representatives, and there are still a lot of loose ends, but I suppose whatever happened has already been taken to the grave. Number 10, the Keg Mansion in Toronto. This one's for me. I'm so sorry. But here it is. Tell anyone in Toronto that you're going to the Keg Mansion for dinner. Be ready to receive the... You know it's haunted, right? Because they will do that. They will do that. Because it is. I have been there on several occasions and I can verify that heading to the upstairs girls' bathroom alone is a harrowing journey. The haunting goes back all the way to 1915. Before it was the Keg, it was the home of industrialist Hart Massey and his family. Legend has it that the Massey's daughter Lillian passed away and her maid was so distraught over her death that she took her own life. That's one theory. Others say that she committed the act to avoid the dread of her affair with Massey being revealed. Either way, the ghostly image of a maid hanging by the neck has been seen multiple times by employees, I have friends who work there, and guests alike. It's been a Keg since the 1970s, and Ed and Lorraine never visited, neither for business or pleasure. There are either two reasons for this: they were too busy, or the idea of a ghostly apparition appearing mid-bite didn't sound very appealing to them. How do you like your spirit? Rare or well done? Number 9, the Myrtles Plantation. This 18th century plantation, along with a 600-acre land, carries with it a dark past. Perhaps it's due to the fact that no one was living in it as to why the Warrens never visited, but the haunting itself is pretty terrifying. Though only one person was confirmed to have been killed on the property, with the history of slavery surrounding the estate, the number is estimated to be a lot higher, as we can probably guess. One of the most famous ghosts who reportedly walks the ground is that of Chloe. Chloe was a slave who poisoned the birthday cake of the daughters of Clark Woodruff to take a small kind of revenge on her awful masters. She apparently didn't intend for the girls to die, only to fall ill, but alas, they died. When they did, her fellow slaves were so fearful of Woodruff finding out that they hung Chloe for her crimes. This tale has fluctuated over the years, but the verified murder was that of William Drew Winter, who was shot on his porch and reportedly crawled back into the house, climbed to the 17th step on the stairs in time to die in the arms of his love. Both tales have sparked sightings of spirits on the ground, and in Winter's case, visitors reportedly see and hear bloody footprints crawl to the 17th step and then stop. Had the Warrens visited the property, they could have potentially confirmed what spirits remain restless on the property, but alas, we will never know. Number 8, Villisca Axe House. Adding to this list of properties that make you want to run away is the Villisca Axe House. The story goes as follows. On June 10, 1912, Josiah and Sarah Moore, along with their children, were bludgeoned to death inside their home, but no one knows who did it. It is one of America's most infamous cold cases, and the home remains preserved exactly as it was, except for the bodies, obviously, though many report that their spirits remain. The Warrens never charged for their work. They simply liked helping people because go Warrens. But the people who now run the Haunted Museum have no problem charging their visitors. The house remains a tourist attraction and there's a steep price to pay should you wish to stay the night. Besides the $400 fee, it may cost you your life. Allegedly in 2014, a paranormal reporter stayed at the house, and at 12:45 in the morning, the owners got the call. The man was found covered in stab wounds, which authorities later reported were self-inflicted. The Warrens risked their well-being all the time. So my theory is that the investors were the ones that kept them away because they didn't want to scare the ghosts away because they were making them so much money, but, you know, it would have been nice to hear their thoughts. Number 7. Los Feliz Mansion. Have you ever entered a room or building that immediately gave you like the heebie-jeebies, like something in your gut was screaming at you that you weren't supposed to be there? Well, that is the exact feeling people encounter when they stand outside this mansion. On the night of December 6, 1959, Dr. Harold Perelson snapped and took the life of his wife and eldest daughter before he took his own. His two youngest managed to escape after their eldest sister screamed. He was a successful doctor with a happy family life, so no one knew why this happened. Some blame financial issues after one of his investments failed, but one creepy factor was that a passage from Dante's Divine Comedy was left open on his bedside table like a note. Ever since the event, people report an overwhelming feeling of foreboding that prevents visitors from entering. It was used as a storage unit by a family who purchased it 2 years after the event, but it was never lived in again. Number 6. The Jean Harlow Haunting. It sounds like bad luck followed all those who lived in this home. You may have heard of old Hollywood actress Jean Harlow and her horrendously abusive husband, Paul Byrne. In 1932, Byrne took his own life while standing in front of a mirror, though some believe foul play since the butler who found him called MGM Studios first, not the police. Byrne's ex-girlfriend jumped off a boat to her death days later, so there was some speculation if it was her. Jean moved out, but died later at the ripe age of 26, super young. So as you can tell, that house did not have good vibes. But then, in 1963, Jay Sebring bought the house with his then girlfriend, Sharon Tate. Tate in a couple interviews recounted events in the house that creeped her out, such as the appearance of a short man, probably Byrne, staring at her in the master bedroom. She also saw a shadowy figure hanging with a slit throat in the hallway. Creepier still, Tate and Sebring would later fall victim to the horrendous and horrific Charles Manson massacres. Tate was the same age as Harlow when she died, also a really creepy coincidence. Something dark clung to whoever lived in the house and is still presumed to be haunted to this day. Number 5. 455 Sackett Street. When you think of a haunted house, a specific image appears in your brain. It's either a farmhouse or a mansion, there's really no in between. But you would think we would hear more about haunted apartment buildings since there is a large turnover, which is perhaps why the haunting of 455 Sackett Street didn't get as much attention. This place was riddled with unexplained fires, ominous feelings and sudden drops in temperature, and family tragedies. Everyone who lived there experienced dark things. What with the history of the building being riddled with insidious affairs, mob hits and dealings, and grim attacks, bound to happen. Jane, one of the women who lived there, once had a friend see a little boy in burnt rags staring at her. This event proved even more terrifying as after the woman moved out, the apartment was renovated. Within the walls of her apartment, they found a corpse fitting the above description, tucked inside the walls. So if you are ever in Brooklyn, don't request an in-person viewing. The Warrens never did. Number 4. Hotel Monte Vista. We all know the idea of a place being haunted is enough to lure in guests, but if guests can't even make it through the night, then there's a problem. And they needed the Warrens, but they never showed up. The Hotel Monte Vista opened as a community hotel in 1927, and soon a history of opium dens, tragic affairs, mob dealings once again, and secret gambling swelled around the place, as did their paranormal reputation. The hotel has become known for its ghostly sightings, such as in room 220. A long-term boarder had a strange habit of hanging meat from the ceiling in that room. I don't know why the hotel let them do that. And the lodger himself was found dead 3 days after his death. The TV allegedly changes channels on its own, and the sheets have been found torn to shreds. In room 210, the small voice of a bellboy announcing room service can be heard, though no one appears. John Wayne even experienced this. In room 306, the corpses of 2 women of the night were thrown over the balcony. Guests who stay there report feelings of being suffocated by hands while they sleep. Staff Staff are plagued by sounds of infants crying in the basement and have been seen running to escape the sound. The list goes on and on. Perhaps it was more the money machine that kept the Warrens away, but it would have been cool to hear their take on the hauntings. Number 3, Poveglia Island. There are many reasons why the Warrens never visited this island, the number one being that it's so freaking terrifying it's actually illegal to visit. It's also in Italy, though they traveled all the time, so what's the reason? Poveglia Island plays host to over 160,000 violent deaths, from being a hospice for victims during the bubonic plague, then an asylum run by a mad doctor. The tormented past of the island has no limits. The story of the doctor on the island is the most menacing though. He performed cruel and malicious experiments on his patients, but their souls took revenge on him and allegedly drove him mad. So mad that he tried to throw himself off of the clock tower. And witnesses say that on the night it happened, a mysterious mist consumed the island. Those who decide to take a boat and venture as close as possible to it report hearing screams and moans that chill the bones. Even creepier, people report hearing a bell toll from across the bay, even though it was removed years before. Scientists who have studied the strange happenings of Poveglia have identified an electromagnetic field that surrounds the property, but there's no electricity to the island, so what's the reason? Number 2, the Dandy House. This may have been a job too big for the dynamic duo. A dream home turned nightmare, the Dandys experienced some of the most terrifying encounters since the Bell Witch. I said it. Clara and Phil Dandy lived in this house along with their kids in the 1970s and endured all kinds of encounters, from disembodied voices to footsteps racing around the house. It's a wonder they stayed as long as they did. The creepiest thing I saw described is that once they witnessed strange faces watching them through the windows. When Mr. Dandy ran outside to confront them, first of all, brave dude, badass, mad respect, the faces were looking out at him from inside the house. From there things got worse. Some of the things even sounded like aliens. They saw floating white specters and half animal, half human creatures watching them. Objects flew around the room, one lamp barely missed one of their daughters. They involved clergy and Ed and Lorraine to help clear the house, but even they couldn't rid the house of whatever possessed it. In fact, whatever they did made it worse. It got so bad, the Dandys ended up leaving the house after nothing worked. And last but not least, the Mothman in number 1. The legend of the Mothman, alien, angel, or demon. Described as a tall half-man, half-bird-like creature with glowing eyes, the Mothman even has skeptics unsure of what to say. The most famous groupings of sightings occurred between November 15th, 1966 to December 15th in Point Pleasant, West Virginia. Prophetic in nature, sightings of the creature are often followed by tragic events such as the Silver Bridge disaster. The aforementioned bridge collapsed on December 15th, which coincided with the last sighting of the creature. 46 people passed away, and because sightings ceased after this, people believe he was an angel of death of sorts. More recently, sightings of the Mothman started taking place in 2011 in Chicago. I know the Warrens strictly dealt with demons and possession, but considering how mystifying this whole event was, it would have been interesting to hear what they had to say.